Joining me now is former Congressman Steve King of Iowa. Congressman, thanks for being with us tonight.
We're glad to be. Thanks for having me on, Brennan.
Tell our audience a little bit about you. I think a lot of our audience knows who you are because you had a very long career in the U.S. House. But for those who maybe don't know, because this is really your first time on my show, you're on with Tamara Scott all the time. But this here on our network, noon Central each day. But your first time here. So tell our audience a little bit about Steve King.
Well, at first, Tamara's a terrific friend. But my background is I grew up in a law enforcement family. And my father steeped me in the Constitution, the rule of law, and of course the Bible. And so I went out into the world, and I can see that we had accumulated a negative net worth of $5,000. Marilyn and I, my high school sweetheart, now of 53 years, and I knew we had to do something. So I convinced a Democrat banker to loan me 100% against an old beaten-up bulldozer that weeds were growing around it out in Nebraska. I'm Iowa, by the way. And so I drug it in and welded on it for 2 weeks and rolled it out. Now I've got a business. And 3 hours later, 10 o'clock in the morning, the engine blew up. And about 7 or 8 days later, Marilyn's out there on the tracks, now pregnant with would be our first son, about 3.5 or 4 months pregnant, with a 7-foot cheater pipe torquing the head bolts on that old D7. So from there on, we built a construction company. And then I went to the Iowa Senate in 1996. I would go down and talk to those legislators, and sometimes it just didn't just register. And so I thought, I need to go find somebody that will represent me in the Senate. And I set about recruiting somebody, but they all pointed their fingers back at me and became my kitchen cabinet. So I unseated a 24-year Republican incumbent state senator in a primary with a 2-to-1 margin. And then 6 years in the Iowa Senate, where I pushed English as the official language and the social agenda, the fiscal conservative agenda. And there was a seat that opened up in Congress for the 2002 election after the 2002 election after the redistricting in 2000. And in that 4-way primary, I'm the guy that didn't have the money, but I went everywhere all the time. And we came out of that primary having won the race for Congress. So just as a construction guy, I went off to Congress and found myself on the Judiciary Committee and on the Small Business Committee, which is fairly natural, and on the Ag Committee. And I love the Judiciary Committee. It's the most polarized committee on the Hill. It's based on constitutional law and the statutes that come through. It's where the social agenda gets fought out and where, of course, crime and punishment gets fought out. So I went through that for 18 years. And in the process of doing so, I emerged as one of the lead voices on a number of things. Maybe I'll say the lead voice on building a wall on the southern border. I was so frustrated with then Paul Ryan standing up on a regular basis and saying, well, I come from a construction family, he would say, but you can't build a wall down there. It's too hard. It's hot. It's desert. It's got mountains. It's got rocks. It's got a river. And the toad has to hop across the border, and the long-nosed bat has to fly his route or whatever. And I thought, this is nuts. So went to the lumber yard and got some tongue and groove boards and cut them in the right lengths, painted them gray, built a little foundation. I went to the floor of Congress and I showed them how easy it is to build a wall on the southern border. I set a model up, and that seemed to stick pretty well. Of course, they attacked me right away. And also, I pushed English as the official language. Very grateful that Trump has put that in place by executive order, and I hope it follows by law. You'll probably know me also, a lot of your viewers, I think, Brandon, because I'm the original author of the Heartbeat Bill at the national level. And I want to say that Janet Porter out of Ohio was a driving force on this. Phyllis Schlafly it was her funeral where I heard that calling to step forward and push it. Took it into Washington, really carefully drafted the bill, crafted and drafted the bill, and then worked it hard in the House. Got to 174 co-sponsors on that legislation, and we had all the support we needed to do a markup in the Judiciary Committee, roll it to the floor. We had the votes to pass it on the floor by my count, and that was without exceptions for rape and incest. Because those babies don't deserve to be executed because of, I'll say, the circumstances of their conception. And Kevin McCarthy killed that bill in the last 2 weeks of that session in 2000 and what would it be in 2020, I suppose it was, maybe it's 2018. It was 2020. And but in the meantime, I'd gone out to multiple states and pushed the heartbeat bill along with others. We passed it through in Iowa, Texas. There's something like 16 states that have some version of the heartbeat bill now. So I count that as saving lives every day. God's children every day have an opportunity to breathe, to live, to laugh, to learn, and have children of their own. So I would say that's the I call that as an accomplishment. And of course, when Roe versus Wade was reversed, and that was June 24th, I believe, that should be a national holiday. Had I been in Congress, I would have introduced that legislation to do so. Probably lost, but I would have put the marker down. And then they decided that I was a little bit too vocal, a little bit too independent, and they couldn't buy me, and they couldn't influence me, and they couldn't intimidate me. And so it was a nationwide sting set up to push me out of office. And we can talk about that or not. I'm fairly comfortable. But you see over my shoulder, the book is Walking Through the Fire, my fight for the heart and soul of America. And that's what I always fought for American exceptionalism, for the underlying principles that built this country, for the Constitution. And I've always believed that if you bring this back to those pillars of American exceptionalism, most of which are within the Bill of Rights, freedom of speech, religion, press, keep and bear arms, you can go on right on out to the 10th Amendment. You only really have to add the rule of law and free enterprise capitalism, and you've got the foundation for this great America, which is the flagship for the fleet of Western civilization. And it's under assault, it's under attack all over the world, but targeting all of our values. And if we lose this, and boy, that looks to me like President Trump has pulled us out of the pit on this. But if we were to lose, if the civilization would collapse, then that's the flagship of Western civilization, the United States of America. If we sunk, the entire fleet is sunk, and they would scrub out they would scrub out Christianity, they scrub out Western civilization itself. We have been the target for a long time, and I've been saying that for a long time. But now I see that we've got President Trump will utter those words, Elon Musk will utter those words, many of the cabinet members will also. I can just feel the current of our society rejecting those anti-values that have been taking us apart for so many years.
100%.
So that's how I see about it, Brandon.
And your resume, I mean, the things from English as the official language, building the border wall, the heartbeat bills. I mean, what an amazing career for the things you stood for. We don't have to go into great detail because I have a bunch of things I want to talk to you about as such a seasoned member of the U.S. House of Representatives. But I do want to ask you about this. It sounds like, so here you are taking on Paul Ryan, the Uniparty. You know, most of those people we know are never Trumpers, you know. And so it sounds like the Uniparty was trying to control you, co-opt you, your book, Walking Through the Fire. You're not willing to be controlled. I'm going to be Steve King. My constituents know who I am, what I stand for. They elected me to carry out this worldview. So how did they, since they couldn't influence you and they couldn't buy you and couldn't control you, they sought to malign you, mischaracterize you, and attack you? What did they do?
Well, it would be, I guess I'll say it became more clear to me in 2018 when, I won't go through the whole long story, but I will just say that there was a negative story written in Esquire magazine that just had no basis to start with. And then that got dropped in. And then within about a month, I was being called anti-Semitic. And it kind of fits in with the dialogue prior, but I've got a 100% voting record with Israel. I've sat in Bibi's office, his private office, at least twice, and had a number of good conversations with him. I believe that the Jews are just simply our older brothers and sisters, and we are all God's children tied together, and we have to make sure that Israel survives. But I got called anti-Semitic because I criticized George Soros, and I didn't pay any attention.
Wait a minute,
to that,
I criticize George Soros all the time. So you're called anti-Semitic for criticizing George Soros, who on 60 Minutes says that he was given over to his handler by his father because his father was trying to protect him during that horrific time in Germany, I guess, right? Was it Germany or whatever country he was in?
Austria, I believe.
Okay. And he, well, I can even pull up the clip here in a second.
It was Hungarian, but I think it happened in Austria.
Okay, Austria. And he says, George Soros says he was not sorry he went around collecting the property of the Jews. So here's a Jewish guy going around with a non-Jewish guy, his handler, if you will, collecting the property of Jews at 14. Well, at 14, I would have had enough of a conscience to know this isn't right. And he says he did not regret it, feels no guilt. Now, if someone disagrees with George Soros or Karl Marx or Sigmund Freud, that doesn't make you anti-Semitic disagreeing with their worldview. You didn't attack his heritage or his. I don't even know if the man practices Judaism. I mean, but this was. I mean, talk about a thin a really massively made up manufactured narrative, but it actually flew. It actually worked.
It was a significant part of the narrative that they loaded on me. And I know it was loaded up in my political opponent out of what he said before he should have even had any thoughts about it. That wasn't the whole thing they threw at me, though. They threw all kinds of things at me: racist, bigot, homophobe, white nationalist, white supremacist. All of those things were being hurled at me. And on top, and then when we got to the 2018 general election in November, by the week before that election, Steve Stivers, who was the chairman of the NRCC, whose job it is to elect and re-elect Republicans, turned against me, attacked me, and his communications director did the same thing 3.5 hours later. I was running against all the Democrats and all the Republicans and all the media, and they had also shut down my funding stream. So I didn't have a lot of money, but we won that election with a 3.2% victory. Every other Republican in the Iowa congressional delegation in the House all lost. I was the only standing person. And the next week, the governor of Iowa stood up in a press conference and said, Representative King needs to decide what he wants to do, whether it's to represent the people and the values of the 4th District or, do something else. We knew that was open season on me, and it was. And so then after they poured everything over my head in that election, the week before Thanksgiving, Jeff Rowe wanted to have a conference meeting with me and a number of my staff. And so we went ahead with that. And he told me they're going to try again. They will pick a time when there's a low news cycle, and they will trigger an all-out media barrage on me because they believe they could force me to resign. And I'm sitting there thinking, I just won an election. And what would they have on me to try to force me to resign for? I felt pretty clean. Apparently I was, because they didn't find anything. But by January, there was a story written in the New York Times that quoted me as saying, let's see, white nationalism, white supremacy, and Western civilization. How did that language become offensive? But in that interview, which there's no tape for and no notes accessible, in that interview, I repeated what I had repeated other times in other media outlets, which is, I understand racism, bigot, homophobe, white nationalist, white supremacist, all those names to put on people. But Western civilization, you're attacking me for defending Western civilization. How did that language become offensive? Why did I sit in classrooms learning about the merits of Western civilization now to be lambasted for defending it? And that was my statement into the New York Times, but that's not what they printed. And they knew that article was going to be the trigger because the author that wrote that, Trip Gabriel, said, and we had him on tape saying, that he didn't think that line was going to be the one that did it. He knew he was writing a story they were going to use against me, but he was even surprised at which line they actually used when they did it. And after that, there was nothing I could say or do. I was the worst person in the world for, it seems like 2 years. I just remember opening up my Google page and finding the first day after all those months that my face wasn't on that page. And I thought, well, maybe I weathered the storm. But the Lord walked with me the whole time.
Wow.
We all know that.
And there was no recording. So you're saying, hey, I didn't say that. They've got you misquoted, and yet that's what they use, a misquote, to try to destroy you and make you into something that you're not. Well, I guess you then, certainly during his first term and then his 4 years out of office, now back in office, you must sympathize a little bit with President Trump because they've tried to do the same thing to him. I don't think that would work on you today.
I think you're right, Brandon. That's an astute observation. I was probably the first one that they ran that gambit on. And And President Trump, I'll say for me, the title of my book is Walking Through the Fire. He did more than walk through the fire. He walked through the inferno. But I can tell you, it tempers the steel within your spine when you go through these things. And his is very well tempered. And I think that he's a far better president right now in these first couple, 3 months of his presidency than he would have been if he'd have been successful in being inaugurated in 2000 in the election after 2020, 2021. Because he came in with these ideas that there was a bipartisanship and patriotism and free enterprise capitalism and that kind of thing. But he learned that there's not bipartisanism that's working if you're trying to take a president down. And when they unloaded all of the tools of government against Trump, every branch of government, every cabinet seat that I can think of sitting around the Biden cabinet lined up to use whatever tools they could use to attack him. And they didn't. They weren't constitutional. They weren't lawful. They just simply, they decided to impeach him. I believe they decided to impeach him in the first term, the weekend after he was elected in 2016. And I've got some significant reason to believe that. But he stood through it all, went back and fought them all. And he decided all the way along the way, here's what I need to do to put America back on the rails again. Part of that might be getting a little bit of even, and that's okay with me, because wherever I can see he might be getting even, he's also fixing America and replacing us back down to the framework we need to build the country on.
Well, let's talk about that, getting things maybe squared up and even. I did check. It was hungry for George Soros. Yeah, so that's where that was going on. Well, let's talk about that. The markets today are down, what, 2,231 points or something, and the left is making big hay out of that. I saw a video early this morning in my show prep, and apparently after I got done watching it, President Trump, I'm told, retweeted it or put it out on Truth Social. So apparently he must agree with it. That's what my staff's telling me, is that he put this video out himself, part of it. Here's the video itself.
Trump is crashing the stock market by 20% this month, but he's doing it on purpose. And this is why Warren Buffett just said Trump is making the best economic moves he's seen in over 50 years. Now, here's the secret game he's playing, and it could make you rich. So why is he doing this? To push cash into treasuries, which forces the Fed to slash interest rates in May, and those lower rates give the Fed the ability to refinance trillions of debt very inexpensively. It also weakens the dollar and drops mortgage rates. Now, it's a wild chess move, but it's working. Now, you're probably wondering, what about his tariffs? Well, I'll tell you, it's a genius play. It actually forces companies to build here to dodge them. It also forces farmers to sell more of their products here in the U.S. to bring grocery prices way down. We've already seen this with eggs. Now, remember, 94% of all stocks are owned only by 8% of Americans. So Trump, he's taking from the rich short term and handing it to the middle class through lower prices.
All right. So what do you make of this, Congressman?
That's terrific. It's broad. It hits a lot of pieces. I watched the first third of it or so, and I'm thinking, yeah, let's just keep buying on the way down. When it stops going down, maybe stop buying. But I think, too, that the markets need to take an adjustment. I think the tariff, I haven't taken it apart and looked at it piece by piece, and I hear the complaints that are going on. But when you look at the disparity that exists between the tariffs, and we put a lot of money into Europe with the imbalance that was there. We've done it a lot of places, and a tremendous imbalance with regard to China as well. So I'll say bring it. The tariffs on Mexico and on Canada have something to do with illegal immigration. And I will still say more so Mexico than it is in Canada. Logistically, it's a much more pressure on us. That helps him get agreements in the countries in South America, too. And we didn't have a country like Venezuela that was taking back their illegal aliens. There were a number of them that would not do that. And so we turn them loose in the streets of America. But when that plane went on up in the air and had 238 gang members on it being deported, they were Venezuelan, being deported down to El Salvador and the CICOT prison there that was put together by President Bukele. And the judge said, "You got to return them, turn that plane around." And President Bukele said, "Well, too late." As far as whoopsie, too late. That's something that comes out from tariffs. And then now it looks like Venezuela's taking their illegals back. That has to do with the tariffs that he's using. He's playing multidimensional chess, and he can be in it for the long term. He's got no consequence at the end of his presidency, as this looks to be, maybe not to him, it looks to me like it's the last term. So I like the chess game that he's playing. It's global, and we are the economy of the world, and whatever we do impacts across the entire world. Another thing that's happening is that this restoration of our core values, getting rid of all the wokeness that's out there and translating that through our military, our schools, along the way, that's also echoing around the world. The global culture, at least with Western civilization, is led by the United States of America, and he's leading us out of that swamp that we've been in, and setting up good standards underneath. We have to tighten our belts, yes, and it's going to hurt for a while. We can have a really sound America the other side of it, Brandon.
And he needs to refinance, about $7 trillion in debt here at some point this year. Is that right?
I don't know that number, but it's not at all surprising. We just keep rolling this thing. $7 trillion in debt to refinance. And the interest rates were lower than they are now. And so I think the overall push of this is putting more money into bonds. That's the safest place to go with that. And that the argument on the cash seems to make sense to me, although I had not given it any thought before I saw that clip, at least in the contemporary.
So it sounds like what President Trump is trying to do is force the Fed to lower interest rates. Is that right? You think that's what he's trying to do?
Force the Fed to lower the interest rates and also make more cash available. And so that will push the interest rates down too. Our national debt, I think it's worth saying that last time I checked, about half our national debt was held by Americans. And then we also, of course, we've got a lot of national debt that's spread around the world, the Chinese and the Saudis and the UAE and on. The countries that have a surplus and a sovereign wealth fund put their money into U.S. bonds. And so, but with half of the Americans holding half that debt, that tells you, and if we were to default, that would be a global economic collapse. So we just can't let that happen. But we need to get our solid money underneath us, and Musk sees that. I'm actually I shouldn't even act surprised. Yeah, I am very impressed with the depth and the breadth of the approach that Elon Musk brings to this. He came into it because he could see that America couldn't sustain itself if we kept on the trajectory we were on. And when he bought Twitter and turned it into X, that took care of the censoring that was going on throughout cyberspace and print media and on. And we've seen horrible examples of what the Biden administration commanding that different people and different messages be censored and shut down. And he opened that up, and he's got it right when it is that, I'll just say this way, what good young people need to do, the best thing they can do for their country is have a lot of babies and raise them right. That's what makes the country and the world a better place, is when you multiply that into the next generations. He's got that figured out, I believe, although I wouldn't approach it the same way as he does. And then with the technology, instant real-time communications, AI should make all of us nervous, but it's coming. And so who's going to manage that, and how do we sort through? It's another big question. But the fundamental principles that our founding fathers put in place and that the framers put in place are still the foundation that makes America an even greater nation and leads the world.
And I was looking it up here to see it, somewhere around $7 trillion to $9 trillion, depending on the report I'm reading, of debt that needs to be refinanced. So if he can push that down, that's going to save us money, because I read right now, if the report's accurate, $1.3 trillion is what we're spending each year in interest on this national debt. 1.3 trillion. And I played some clips last night on my show, basically about the debt loop we're in. There was a guy that's written a book talking about the big print, and he's saying the government's really going to have, apparently, to make a choice here. And one of the choices they may make is just to print the money, which of course is going to see massive inflation. And I think we're going to see gold go much higher. I mean, Congressman, you've been around long enough. Did you ever think you'd see $3,100 gold? And it's gone up like $500 an ounce just in the last few months, right? And people are looking for hard assets to get into. They kind of see what's coming. But you've got us adding to that national debt. I read the other day, $11 trillion $11 trillion in new debt just in the last 5 to 6 years. I mean, we can't sustain this.
When I went into Congress, if my recollection is correct, our national debt was around $7 trillion, and now it's what, 36 trillion, someplace in there. And this is a narrative worth telling. I swore in January of 2003, and we were already at war in Afghanistan. And when the budget came out of the Budget Committee, chaired by Jim Nussle, a fellow Ireland, whom I've counted as a friend for a long time, there I am, freshman. And we'd had balanced budgets since about 1998. They were balanced under Bill Clinton, partly out of spite, and they got more money coming in than they expected. So then they kept producing balanced budgets, probably 98, 99, 2000, 2001, 2002. But 2000, and I guess it would be the 2003 fiscal year also. Then for the 2004, which I arrived for, there's no balanced budget, and there's a great big deficit spending. And so it was a little hard for me to write a balanced budget then as a freshman. I didn't have the network to do that. But I went to Chairman Nussle and I said, "Where's our balanced budget, Jim?" And he said, "We can't balance the budget." And I said, "Why not? We've always balanced the budget the last few years." And he said, "Well, we're at war in Afghanistan. We're preparing to go into war in Iraq. We've got all these things to harden to protect us from terrorism, our food supply, our power supply, and all. That's going to take a lot of money. We can't balance the budget." And I said, "Jim, we can ask the American people to tighten their belt. We must do that and keep this budget balanced even through this time, because if we don't," and I use the exact words, "we will have the devil's own time ever balancing it again," close quote. And here we are, these 24 or so years later, 20-some years later, and we haven't seen a balanced budget since. We've been living off of continuing resolutions. They have been avoiding the debates that need to happen. And then I pushed to get balanced budgets to the floor for a vote. It took me nearly 10 years to get the barrier out of the way so we could bring a balanced budget to the floor. And that balanced budget was such a disappointment. It was, well, okay, we're going to balance the budget in 10 years. This is the way we calculate this. And then next year, well, just each year, we're going to just drop a year off of it. Well, anyway, by the time we get to 10 years, it's going to be balanced. But of course, you know how that goes. We'll just push it ahead another year. And 10 years we'll balance the budget, and 20 years later, nothing was balanced. And I don't even hear the discussion anymore among the members of Congress about getting to balance until now. They just simply ignore it and more or less hit the green button and go. And I wrote a number of balanced budgets, by the way. And I tell you one that Paul Ryan was a budget chair through part of that time, and he called some of us up to his office to sell us on his budget. And he's going through that, and he had these graphs on how we were going to get to budget. His budget was going to balance in 25 years. And I looked at that graph and I said, look at that loop on there. The spending goes up, then it comes around, then it comes back down again. That looks to me like you're waiting for the baby boomers to die before you balance the budget. And he looked at me and he said, well, yeah, it has to be that way, but you didn't have to say that. Mm. So, yeah, there's a lot of things going on with, and people that, even with the demographics, they would say, well, we need, and Paul Ryan included, we need to have these immigrants come into America because they're the ones that are going to be working and having babies, and they'll pay for the retirement of the baby boomers and beyond. And I would say, and I had this in hearings under oath, a demographic expert out of Stanford made a similar statement. And I said, well, then if you're going to bring in a lot of immigrants to pay for the retirements of the baby boomers, why not tell me who's going to pay for their retirement, those people you're bringing in? And he just said, that's for another generation to worry about. That's not good enough for people that are leading the free world. No,
it's sure not. And now let's talk about the border. President Trump is, doing what he can do to get all these folks out of here. But in the meantime, we've had the battlefield has been prepared. A lot of guys that were in the military, but some of them now have gotten out of the military. But they've been telling me, some of the guys in the intelligence community that are friends of mine that come on the broadcast, again, formerly at the time they were in their jobs, now they've retired. We're saying, look, Brandon, we were nervous under the Obama administration. We had 8 years of the battlefield being prepared. We don't have a clue who's here. Then it was just the floodgates were opened under Biden. We know we've got terror cells here. We now have Israel and America talking about dealing with Iran. And I've got Islamic experts, including one that was on here last night, Dave Gobbets, who wrote the book Muslim Mafia with Paul Sperry, saying, if we go after Iran with Israel, the American people just need to know they have plenty between Hamas and, of course, their own terror cells. of Hezbollah, they've got plenty of terror cells here in the U.S. He says they've got thousands of them here already in the U.S. I don't think we should be blackmailed by that, but I think the American people ought to know this. And I think they also ought to understand what it is these people can do to our critical infrastructure. Do you think that we as a people have not become a nation of preppers? I remember the former head of FEMA during I think President Trump's first term saying we need a nation of preparedness. We need to become a nation of preppers. Because he said, I'm tired of going to one crisis after another and seeing people that don't even have the basics that they didn't prepare. They didn't even prepare with basics, and now the government can't efficiently and quickly get to their basic human needs. If they just had done a moderate amount of preparation. What are your thoughts on the terror cells in the U.S., the borders down, the battlefield being prepared, the critical infrastructure that is now at risk by these terror cells? Should we decide we need to do something in the interest of Israel, in the interest of America with Iran, or other countries for that matter? And then the lack of Americans that are ready and prepared on their own, because the government can't come and save everybody, nor should it be their job.
Boy, if you go, let's just see. First, I do believe that there are thousands and thousands of fifth column people in here from multiple countries. The Chinese, we've seen the videos of them, the reports of 10,000 here, another 10,000 there coming through the Darien Gap. I've seen the videos of the Chinese advertising to send their 20 to 25-year-old men into the United States through that route and go to Colombia and take a boat across the water and park it there on the peninsula, and then walk up through the Darien Gap and get to the United States. They were advertising that, and they're showing whole boatloads of young Chinese men that are jollily smiling along their way while they're happily going into America. How many of them are trained to be special forces, and how many of them have been trained to hate America? Most of them, I think. That's just the Chinese. I don't know that there's a country that produces terrorists that we haven't picked up scores of them from those countries, and why are they sending them here? So I do think that there's a significant fifth column. What I don't know is, are they coordinated with each other? Is it Hezbollah here and Hamas there and the Chinese over here and some other events pushed against them? I don't know the answer to that, but I do know that we're vulnerable, and you've got the EMP piece of that, the electromagnetic pulse that could shut down so much of our electrical and our network and our communications, which we're more and more vulnerable to. Just every day we're more vulnerable to that. And by the way, the World Economic Forum and the Biden administration wants us to go to electronic currency, and they want the electronics to run everything. If they can do that, if we can't heat our house, run our air conditioner, run our refrigerator, keep our meat in the freezer, and then we can't drive our car, we can't run our lawnmower or our weed blower, all those things, we're subject to somebody clicking a mouse somewhere that can shut us down, shut us off, or detonate an EMP, that or a series of them that would shut us down substantially. And so that's why you're seeing people that are figuring out how to live off the grid. A lot of that is go back to the old ways, can your food, preserve your food, have a way to have a generator, but that fuel for that's only going to last so long. But I am concerned that there will be some kind of hit. And when after September 11th, if we had Robert Mueller was the director of the FBI, and he ordered them not to monitor the imams in the mosques, when all they had to do was go sit there, say, run a tape recorder, take notes, and listen. They could figure out where all this heat's coming from, or a lot of it was coming from. Some of it was behind closed doors, but a lot of it was right out there in the open.
Oh, we played a ton of clips last night from imams, many of them in America, talking about jihad and how it's their calling and it's in their hadiths, it's in their Quran. I mean, this is going on in the mosque all over America. You know, we had a mosque down the road, still there, but we had one down the road being led by Yasser Qadi a few years ago. And I said to local law enforcement, do you guys know who this guy is? Yasser Qadi? He's like a rock star in the Islamic world on a global scale. He's been banned from going into parts of Europe, according to numerous reports, because of who he's tied to. He's hanging out with Linda Saussure, you know, and the things that she's saying about President Trump in the White House. He's bringing Siraj Wahhaj to his mosque. That's an unindicted co-conspirator in the bombing of the World Trade Center. And the local law enforcement said, no, we had no idea who the imam is down there, nor what he's saying, nor who he's bringing in. And I said, well, why? And they said, because under federal law, we're not allowed to monitor them or have anything in concern with them. We can't do anything even if we knew who they were. And I'm thinking, well, that's just wrong, because I'm not interested in going after people we get accused of being Islamophobic or whatever, but their ideology, as we just heard from a former Muslim who was in the government consulting and trying to help the government deal with terrorism, is explaining this is not just about a religion. This is their ideology and worldview. That means that mosque is more than a place of worship. It's a seat of government. It is a training facility. And in some cases, it's an armory. We know that the police raided a mosque in Europe, in France, after some terrorist attacks. And the police, it's in press reports we've shown on the screen, are saying we found military-grade weaponry in some of these mosques, for Pete's sake. So I'm very, we got, again, Dave Gobbets, who've now gone into 425 of these mosques undercover. And yet we hardly hear a bleep. Now we see that they're building a 402-acre compound in Plano, Texas, epic. They got one going on, a facility in Irving we showed last night, a whole neighborhood, their mosque. They got Lionel Lakes, they're trying to do what they're doing up there. They've got a humongous one in California we just showed tonight. This is a national trend. And our guest tonight, Hadia, said, if this is what you want to see in America, then just know what it's going to mean. And it's going to mean you have a women being abused, who are being divorced, who don't have any civil rights, who have no inheritance, no part in the divorce. You're done. You're out. You're going to see honor killings. You're going to see honor beatings. You're going to see childhood, quote, marriages. And then you add in free speech. They're going to come after us like they do in the UK and say, as someone in the UK, we played the video of this man simply showing after October 7th, Hamas flags or Palestinian flags flying in his neighborhood. This was the day or two after October 7th. And he says, this is not acceptable. This is not acceptable. We just had people murdered in Israel and they want to fly their flags here in the UK. This is not acceptable. The next video, we played his video. He didn't threaten anyone. The next video we play is someone from his family filming him being arrested for simply posting that video. That's coming to America if we let these people penetrate Congress with all of the Hezbollah, Iranian, Muslim Brotherhood money. What say you?
Well, I say beheading is part of that. And just thinking as I'm listening, that's a pretty good rendition that when on September 11th, they had Somalis that worked in the hospitals in Minneapolis. And they were reportedly, and I got this from a very high report, they were dancing up and down the hallways in the hospital celebrating the attack on us on September 11th. And that's just fairly newly arriving immigrants in Minneapolis. Another thing that comes to mind as I'm listening here, and you talked about the breadth of it, they beheaded a priest in Rouen, France. And it's a town there in Normandy. And I went there. I just thought, I've got to go in this place where it's so evil that if they would behead a priest on the altar. And so I set it up to go there, and they told me, well, you can't go because that church is locked up and you can't go there. I said, I'm going anyway. If I have to stand outside the gates and pray, that's what I'm doing. But I want to stand on that ground where they would behead a priest. And it had been months since that church had been closed. When I arrived there, I didn't realize, but that was the day that they were going to open that church back up again, a Catholic church. And the bishop had come down, and he was at the time walking all through town, blessing every building that there was and praying and around the way. That was about a 2-hour procession. And then he came to the gates of the church that had a new chain and a new padlock on it to open that church up and go in and consecrate the church. And the mayor of that city came to, I'm standing outside on the fence. He's on the inside. He came to me and he said, you're not going to cause any trouble here. And I said, I'm here to pray, and I'm here to be respectfully remembering what happened in this place and try to understand it. And he told me that it didn't have anything to do with religion. It was just a couple of Arabic boys that were out of control, I guess.
Oh yeah.
Whatever there was, they were both Muslims. They beheaded a priest on the altar, and by the way, he told me they didn't really behead him because they didn't have his head completely cut off, just almost.
Okay.
Bad it was. That guy was a communist, by the way. He was the socialist mayor of the town. But they invited me in anyway into that church for the service. And they sat me on the side of the altar within about, I'll say, 8 feet of where that priest was murdered and where his blood was spilled. And the service was about 2 hours long. Of course, it was all in French. I couldn't understand a word, although I can follow some of the liturgy because I am Catholic. And it just was one of the most powerful religious experiences that I have had. That the evil was being scrubbed out of that church. But what a memory for them to all have every day when they walk in that place. Oh. That's the kind of thing that's driven. And if you look back into the history of the anti-Semitism of Muhammad, when he took out the three Jewish tribes there in Medina, and in the last tribe, they thought they were going to get turned loose across the desert like the other two tribes did, where they got stripped and sent out with nothing. Nobody's heard from them again. They probably died in the desert. But the last tribe surrendered, thinking that they were going to get treated the same way, and it was their only chance. Well, they put them down in this valley. They would march, and I believe it was 9 men over the hill, and then behead those 9, and go get 9 more and 9 more. I think there are ranks of 3, 3, and 3, as I remember it. And there was around 700 to 900 Jewish men that were executed under the orders that, under the authority of the officer whom Muhammad had given the authority to execute them all. And of course, they took the women and turned them into concubines, and the children into slaves.
Final video tonight, which really helps us understand where we're going if we let this grow, which is what our last guest, former Muslim attorney, working in our government for 20 years to try to stop. This is what's coming here. This is from over in the UK. This is GBN News. Listen to what they're reporting as what is being proposed in the UK.
Welcome back to GBN Tonight with me, Martin Daubney. Now, the Labour-ran Rushmore Borough Council has sparked outrage by proposing a sweeping injunction that could see Christian street preachers imprisoned for up to 2 years. And if the injunction is breached, now over claims of causing offence or distress. Now, under the proposed terms, Christians will be banned from praying for individuals, handing out religious leaflets or Bibles by hand, and laying hands on people in prayer, even with their permission.
Wow. Well, that's coming to America if Americans don't understand the power of money. And there'll be as many, I hate to say it, in the uniparty, that will grab this money up and do the bidding for these groups that really I call many of these Islamists, I've referred to them as the junkyard dogs. The communists and the Islamists are the junkyard dogs of the globalists to destroy Western society and take down our freedoms. And when the globalists are done using them, then they're going to say, in my opinion, what they'll say is, we got to deal with all the extremists. We got to deal with the extreme left. We got to deal with the extremism in Islam. We've got to deal with the extremist Christians. We got to deal with the extremist Jews. And they're going to then regulate everybody, right? But they're going to use this red-green axis, the red being the Marxists, the green being the Islamists, to de-Westernize us, to de-Christianize the West, tear down our liberties and freedoms, and then they'll remake it. I mean, this is what else is Build Back Better about? Build Back Better? I mean, this is about destroy it and then remake it in a new system. And if we're not watching what's happening in Europe and the UK, then we don't understand what it is they're trying to do here. Because they're doing it over there a few years ahead of us, but it won't take long to catch up. And my concern in closing with you, Congressman, is that the MAGA movement will have no real leader after Donald Trump. I'm concerned about that. I'm concerned that many of these people that are that were never Trumpers, some of them, sadly, who got in around him during his first term, some that maybe were marched out in the last few hours here as not being very loyal. I'm afraid there's too many people around him that are only interested in, the pragmatism of the moment, getting into the White House now. But as soon as President Trump is gone, a lot of these so-called people that are MAGA, we'll never hear MAGA from them. The base is MAGA. The grassroots is MAGA. They want borders closed. They were MAGA before MAGA was cool. If you're singing the old Barbara Mandrell song, these people were MAGA before MAGA was even around. Fix the borders, English only, lower our taxes, smaller government, cut the waste. And when President Trump is gone, I'm afraid what will be left for the Republican Party is going to be a lot of the Paul Ryan types. What say you?
Well, and I hope that's not the case. And I'm looking at J.D. Vance, whom I don't know. I have not met him. But it looks to me like he could be the successor, the heir apparent to Trump. And he's going to get 4 years of training to get to that point. And he or somebody else needs to step forward. You're right. I'm interested in how you describe the red-green axis and how they would like to take us apart, carve us up, and part us out, and then get rid of the extremists on either side. I've described that, similar to that, is that I've got a book over here on my shoulder that's called it's called Shadow World. It's by Colonel Bob Chandler. He's been a Cold Warrior for 45 years. He's since passed away, and I helped him with the book. But he said, he starts in the chapter 7, and he says, they were a bunch of guys sitting around a table at the Army Navy Club, Washington, D.C., ready to celebrate the victory in the Cold War. They raised their glasses to celebrate, and Paul Nitze, who was the father of the mutually assured destruction strategy, the MAD strategy of we'll point our missiles at you, you at us, and nobody will pull the trigger, and we'll have peace. Some successful, actually, to a significant degree. But before they could toast, he said, just a minute, hold it. Don't be too quick to celebrate a victory in this Cold War, because nobody likes the big kid on the block. And soon you will see the coalition of countries like Russia, China, a large Islamic country, and he said maybe India, line up in a coalition to confront the United States. And he's been ever so right on that. The military operations between Russia, China, and Iran have taken place several times by now. But so here we are, as I said earlier, the flagship of Western civilization. But the three forces, you identified two, and the other one we were supposed to know, and we do. But you've got the Marxists, the red, you've got the Muslims, and especially the Islamists, the green, and then here we are, free enterprise Western civilization. Those three forces are competing in the world for dominance. And I don't see how, well, I guess I can't look into that crystal ball, but the force of Marxism and the force of the green, the Islamists, and then you have the World Economic Forum sitting in the middle, which really represent the Uniparty.
Yes.
And the Uniparty thinks they can manage the world, but their economics and their rules and their technology, and they think they can also suspend their own aging process, live forever, which makes them gods in their own mind. So if this whole thing gets taken down, if they take down the United States of America and Western civilization, then there will be a battle royal between the Marxists, the Muslims, and the Uniparty people.
Absolutely.
That'll shake out. We won't live to see that. But the forces in the world, there is no force for good remaining if Western civilization goes down.
100%. 100%. You and I could talk for hours. I appreciate your time tonight. And I look forward to having you back. And I hope people will go to steveking.com. Can they get your book, Walking Through Fire, at steveking.com?
Yes, they can. Just go to steveking.com. And I've still got an inventory here of not very many books, but I've got enough. And I'll autograph a book. Anything that comes out of here at steveking.com, I'll autograph it and ship it to you with these hands right here.
Excellent.
Otherwise, you'll go Amazon or Books A Million or any place books are sold.
Excellent. Well, Congressman, we look forward to having you back. Thank you for being so generous with your time and all that you stood for when you were there, taking on the issue of life, the sanctity of life, border security, so many things to underpin our Judeo-Christian republic. Thank you for that. You know, so many Americans, sadly, have been taught we're a democracy, which is really the founder saw, as you know, as mobocracy, rule the 51%. But yet we're a constitutional republic. And I love that quote when William Blackstone, one of the leading scholars for the founders, was asked, what is a constitutional republic? He said, what the divine has ruled on, we don't rule against. And so when you think about the fact that those that embrace a Judeo-Christian worldview, we are the ones that are not the threat. You know, Biden always said that people, that Christians and people that were acting out their Judeo-Christian worldview, that we were a threat to democracy. And people would say, no, we're not. And I said, no, we actually are a threat to democracy as he defines it, because he means the rule of the 51%, the collective, socialism. Mm-hmm. And you bet we are, because we're defending the constitutional republic, which says, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not covet, private property. If they can get us to turn on our own foundation through this, dialectical materialism, we will end up where we hate our own country's foundation, because we will teach a whole generation or more to hate their own history, heritage, patriotism, standing for the flag, the national anthem, God and country, family, a patriarchal society. They'll get where they hate it so much that only do they want those things to change, those values, they want to destroy the underpinning of our republic, our constitutional republic, our Judeo-Christian worldview. And that's what we're seeing, this eradication of it. So as, Khrushchev said to the Secretary of Agriculture during the I think it was the Eisenhower years, he said, your kids will fall over into our hands like overripe fruit. Well, that's what's about to happen. But we've got to maintain that republic. And that's what you were doing when you defend the borders, our language. Or Michael Savage says border, language, culture. And then the life, sanctity of life. That's what you were doing. And I don't think many, I hate to say it, I don't think many members of Congress on the House side or on the Senate side understand this worldview war. I really don't. Closing comment?
It seemed pretty simple to me. It was just hard to find people that would do it. And but I was called to that task, and people would say, well, thank you for your courage for standing up for our values. And I said, it's not courage. If you have a conviction, it's not courage. But if I went against my values, I wouldn't have enough courage to go against my values. And those values were steeped within me. And of course, they came out of the faith training and the family training and just sense too. And if you understand what made America great, and you see how things are playing out, I don't think you had to have a crystal ball to see where this was going to go. I remember when there was a coyote, a woman who was smuggling a young girl into Texas going on the way to Virginia. And they intercepted her, identified her as not the mother, the coyote, and locked her up. And then the government took this girl and delivered her to her illegal alien mother in Virginia. And Judge Andrew Hanen wrote, thus completing the crime of illegal immigration. The federal government completed the crime. I was lit up by that about 2007. Now it's happened hundreds of thousands of times. Our federal government is completing the crime of illegal immigration by meeting people at the border and shuffling them wherever they want to go. And I've seen it and I've witnessed it. And then just another piece, just an axiom is this, that if you bring somebody into your country, whatever country it is, from another culture, you are actually and always importing their culture with them. And if they get assimilated, if they're not surrounded by people of their same culture, if they get assimilated, then that's fine. But what they tend to do when the numbers grow, the more the numbers are, the more they create this ethnic enclave. Then they reproduce their own country in that ethnic enclave. It's no longer an assimilation process. And so the shift in the culture in the country then shifts because of the massive numbers of legal and illegal immigrants that come in. And assimilation is a dirty word to so many of them on the left and so many of the newer arriving immigrants too. And they've been trained, the left has trained people to hate assimilation. But with assimilation, we've been very, very successful. And we need to bring that back again and promote assimilation in all walks of life. All you have to do is start with and go, we are all God's children. God wants us to respect the rule of law and his law. And if we do those things, then the world works right. And the economy prospers, families prosper, and the next generations have far more hope. Which, by the way, I think the next generations do have hope. And this election of Donald Trump brings that optimism out, I think, in so many of us, Brandon.
Absolutely. Well, we were on the verge. We were just about to tip into, I think, something that maybe we couldn't recover from. We've got some time providentially given to us. We have to do it right and use it right. And that's why we bring people like you to help educate us and encourage us to keep standing up for those principles that can preserve liberty and freedom for a few more generations at least or more. SteveKing.com, SteveKing.com. Congressman King, thank you again for being with us.
My pleasure. Look forward to coming back, Brandon. Appreciate you.
You can count on it. Look forward to having you back. Congressman Steve King checking in. I hope you get his book, Walking Through Fire, SteveKing.com. All right, folks, before we close tonight, look who's awake. Glad you could join us. Back from Sleepy Land? How was it? You woke up just in time to be able to go back to sleep. Yeah. I swish with this every day. It's called Numi, and it's loaded with glutathione. Glutathione, it helps to detox your cells. Glutathione, swishforlife.com, swishforlife.com. Studies show it may actually remove mercury from your brain, helping prevent Alzheimer's, dementia, and Parkinson's. So, I do the Gatatana every day. I do my Bella Grace, and I do my Numi. So again, this is not a joke. This is backed. Glutathione 162,000 studies. 162,000 studies at PubMed on glutathione. Everything we promote, folks, is backed by science. It's not a joke. Swishforlife.com. Hey, as we close, you can roll the music. Here we are, the business cards. Dolly loves these business cards. We have now sent out, how many, Logan, or Caleb? Well, you said like 12,000 the other day. You lost count? All right, well, there you go. We've sent out over 10,000, somewhere around 12,000, he said initially, but now he's lost count. Get your free packet. Get your free packet at worldviewstore.com, Worldview Store. Pass these out, 20 of them for free. Pass them out. Introduce people to our network, won't you? Worldviewstore.com. Oh, and while you're there, check out the freeze-dried food. We got lots of freeze-dried food, 3 month, 6 month, a year, emergency supplies, medical kits, sutures, so much more. Worldviewstore.com. Roll the music. Let's call it a night. And of course, one of our biggest sponsors next to Bella Grace is the foundation, worldviewfoundation.com. That helps us push out free shows, keeps us from having to put it behind the player behind a paywall. We don't want to put the player behind a paywall. We want to keep this out here for everybody, even those who can't afford to support us. We want them to be able to get this information as well. We want to minister to them, equip them, encourage them. But if you can support us, folks, this is what helps us push it out for free. Our bandwidth bill and storage bill for these files is around $8,000 a month. $8,000 a month. Not to count all the free apps we have built. Free content, free apps, free distribution platforms. We need your help. Worldviewfoundation.com. Worldviewfoundation.com. Lord willing, I'll see you Sunday night as I continue teaching through the book of Revelation. Revelation chapter 14. We should be able to wrap that up Sunday night, right here, 8 p.m. Central Time, Sunday night, worldviewtube.com. May God save America. Take care.